Okay. Oh my goodness, three. Took us a minute, everybody. We're coming up. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Santita Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota. Happy Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day. I pray that you are having a blessed Memorial Day. You just heard me talk in the last hour about the origins of Memorial Day, and I hope that you will understand how significant the holiday is, just in brief. Before I go into that, please go to santitajackson.bsky. I'm on Blue Sky, santitajackson.bsky.social. I'm on X at Santita J, the Santita Jackson and Friends page on Facebook, and Santita Jackson YouTube. Hey, thank you all. And everybody help us out with the algorithm. Thumbs up, thumbs up, thumbs up. Like and subscribe. You help us in the algorithm. We don't get flushed out because I get a lot of feedback from you. You're like, I can't find you. I said, but you need to like me just all at one time. Because then we look and we find that we get a lot of views over time. 1.5 million, 2 million views, all that happened quite frequently. But I need you to like and share, like and share, like and share. So you help us with the algorithm. Just very quickly before we talk about George Floyd, 5 years. Can you believe it? Half a decade. It's hard for me to. Who I think of Daniela Frazier, that young girl, 17 years of age, who was walking with her 9-year-old cousin, who saw something in her lived experience. She knew that she needed to pull out her phone and record this. She was a child, everybody. 17, you're a child. But her lived experience told her this is not going to end well. Might even end in his death, and I'm not going to move until I capture all of it. Thank God for that child. But there are a lot of moving parts to that story. And the consent decrees were put in Louisville, Kentucky, where Breonna Taylor was killed in her home, in Minneapolis, St. Paul, where we saw Derek Chauvin choke George Floyd to death on the street. These reforms were put in place and now they've been pulled back. But before we get into that, I want to share with you just again. Memorial Day was created by newly freed African Americans. They saw that the prisoners of war had been dumped in mass graves. As soldiers, that is such an insult. It's a profound insult. And when these newly freed African Americans who were living in Charleston, because Charleston had been all but abandoned in 1865 by white Charlestonians. They'd left the city behind after the war just devastated the South. It had devastated the great city of Charleston. And the people who were left were newly freed African Americans. And they found that these POWs had been dumped. They saw this mound of dirt. They said, what is this in the middle of this racetrack? Well, if any of you saw the movie Glory, at the end uh, when you saw the black and the white soldiers dumped in the grave together, that's really what that was reminiscent of. And that was a profound insult. Remember, Goodman, Schwerner, and Cheney could not be buried together just 60 years ago because two of them were white and one of them was black. Think about that. Think about that. So what they did was they dug them up and they gave them individual burial plots, put crosses on them, consecrated the graves. And thousands of black school children, white missionaries, all of Charleston, which was essentially black, they turned out and they had a decoration day, a memorial day, to give them a proper send off to heaven. Can you believe that? And when there was an inquiry decades later to find out, oh my goodness, well, what happened here? Is it true that black people were at the center of this, that they started this? The Daughters of the Confederacy said no. We don't know. We have no record of that. Well, truth crushed to the earth will rise again. Dr. David Blight, a Yale historian, Pulitzer Prize winner, by the way, was looking for information on the Civil War at Harvard. And he came upon some information that absolutely startled him. He came upon that information that I gave you. And so part of his personal mission has been to let the world know that the origins of Memorial Day started with newly freed African Americans who had had every indignity heaped upon them, but they had enough humanity to not let that happen to anyone else. That's Memorial Day, everybody.
Hmm.
And don't you forget it. So let's talk about George Floyd, everybody. Let's talk about these officers who are able to work at clubs like Derek Chauvin was, and they're in charge in their precincts, right? They really control the off-duty jobs that you get. Wow, that gives them tremendous power. Now, the baseline salary for a police officer in Minneapolis, St. Paul is $93,000 a year. Now, I'm not going to dig into anyone's pockets, but one of the worst places for Black people to live in the United States is Minneapolis, St. Paul. We're doing very poorly there. $93,000 a year is a nice sum of money. It is. But somehow or another, maybe it's just not enough. So now we see that now that federal oversight has been withdrawn for Louisville, Kentucky, where Breonna Taylor was killed in her home, and where it's been withdrawn in Minneapolis, St. Paul, what will that mean? What is a consent decree anyway? Why do we need police reforms? Why have we not been able to get it? And why are they being withdrawn at this time? Wow. What's going to happen now? We've got Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds with us. T.O. Hardeman. Of course, where is your book, T.O. Hardeman? T.O. Hardeman, you're not even listening to me, but that's all right. Attorney
Yeah, I'm
Daryl
listening. I'm
Jones.
listening to you. No, you
What's
went
the
blank
name
for
of
a
your
minute.
book? What's the name of your book?
Oh, here we go. I got it right here for you. Interrupting Gun Violence: The Public Health Approach. You can find it on Amazon without a doubt. Yep.
Okay. And you're going to have another book, and we'll be talking about that when that comes out as soon as you publish it. But I'm going to start with Attorney Daryl Jones, because not only is he the chair of the Transformative Justice Coalition, has his own radio show, as do you, T.O. Hardeman, every Sunday morning from 6 to 7 a.m. Yes? On
Yeah, on WVON
WVON.
1690 AM. Yes.
Oh, that's right. WVON.com, everybody. You can listen to that. And then, of course, you can go to Keep Hope Alive from 7 to 9 Central Standard Time, of course, on the iHeart app. But Attorney Daryl Jones, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on
Kind of keep
WOLDC,
going
Transformative Justice Coalition chair, but he is
out
also a former prosecutor. And so what I want to know
on me a little bit.
you is, what is a consent decree?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it necessary? And what is the significance of it being ended, particularly specifically for Minneapolis and for Louisville, Kentucky?
Yeah, well, happy Memorial Day to you, Santita, and thanks for having us back with this with just a phenomenal panel. A consent decree is an agreement. Is an agreement that's reached in a situation such as this, an agreement that's reached between the U.S. Attorney General's office and an individual policing department, such as in Minneapolis or in Louisville, Kentucky. And what happens is that there's an investigation that is undergone following generally some occurrence, a murder or an investigation or something that occurs that seems to have gone awry. Someone's been beaten up, someone has been killed, and the question is, were there lawful actions that were taken? Are there patterns and practice within the police department that should have been addressed to preserve the interests of the community where this has occurred? So a consent decree is when after the Department of Justice goes in and does the investigation, they come up with a report, they then go to a federal judge, typically a federal judge. And the federal judge then sits with the attorneys that's representing the city or the jurisdiction where the actions occurred, or the police department that's being studied, and the U.S. Department of Justice, their attorneys. And they come up with an agreement where they say, look, here's the history of it, here's the background of it. There's clearly violations of rights that are occurring in this particular jurisdiction. here's what we want to do to correct that. These are the actions, these are the proactive measures that need to be put in place to overcome the history that exists of discrimination, of unlawfully stopping Black folks and brown folks that have gone on in that jurisdiction. This is what needs to be done. And we're going to continue to come back generally once or twice a year sometimes to check in on the progress of what's happening with the consent decree that has been entered. Generically, Santita, is what the consent decree is. In its most fundamental sense, the consent decree is intended to protect particularly minority members, Black and brown members of a community from being wronged by the police. It is to correct the occurrences, the historical occurrences of abuse of vulnerable communities, marginalized communities from the police department, and to try to correct and make that police department put in place practices that are better, that are safer, and that serve the entire community.
I'm trying to find out why, figure out, help me to understand why this was ended. You know, particularly in light of the data that shows us that more people have been killed by police since George Floyd was killed than ever before. I'd like to know, in Minneapolis, they're still searching people without just cause. They've been raiding people's homes. They raided a woman's home. Basically for nothing in the middle of the night. And I'm just trying to find out, does this give police the space to run amok?
Yeah, that's precisely what this does. What this does, President Trump, when he was president last time, he at that point had called on police officers to be able to not be so nice to the people they were arresting. You may recall that, don't put your hand on their head and get them into the vehicle, rough them up a little bit. That type of mentality.
Well, wait, hold on. This is something that I was reading. People are, they're being injured by the police, and police tell them, if you say you're injured, we must take you into jail. And help me with that.
No, that's what it's all about. That's what the consent decree is meant to interject, to try to preclude, to try to get in there and pull apart those practices. Remember also in Louisiana, in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the police department there had what they called a brave cave, right? Where there were people that weren't even accused of crimes, that they would go into the communities and get these people and put them into these abandoned warehouses. And they had an old wooden chair that was in there, and it was away from everybody, so no one really knew where the brave cave was or what was going on. And they would in essence beat these people, beat information out of them, beat them into confessions, those types of things that were occurring in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The similar type of thing that would happen with the Red Dog squads down in Georgia, in Atlanta, Georgia. Same thing that was happening in Memphis, Tennessee with Tyree Nichols, and what was happening there with the Jump Out Boys and all the other squads that they had of police officers that were abusing primarily communities of color. And then threatening them that, if they expose it, that it gets worse, not better. So all of that, Santita, dovetails into what you were lifting up with regards to threatening people about, if you speak up, I'll arrest you, and it gets worse from there. That's what the consent decrees were meant to confront, were meant to go against, was to try to pull these situations and get them under control so that the community could have some trust in the policing and not have complete fear anytime that they hear about their loved one having to go and talk to the police or being stopped by the police. That's what the consent decree is meant to go toward, is particularly those types of situations. And, and I tell you, with the administration now, the Department of Justice now saying that they're rolling back and they're no longer going to have the consent decrees in Louisville, Kentucky. They're no longer, where Breonna Taylor was murdered. They're no longer going to have the consent decrees, in Memphis, Tennessee. They're no longer going to have the consent decrees, and they're looking at closing investigations in Phoenix, Arizona, Trenton, New Jersey. I mean, all over the country. You know, Mount Vernon, New York, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. All of these places, and against the Louisville State Police Department as a whole. So all of these things, when you hear about them rolling back these consent decrees or rolling back or ending the investigations into the policing departments, what they're saying is we're going to let the police department do what it wants to do to whatever people it wants to do them to, and we're not going to review it. And by the way, even if we wanted to review it as the Department of Justice, we have now reduced the Department of Justice and Civil Rights Division. We've cut their attorneys all the way down, so there's no way they could even try to take up the cases, to review all the cases and investigate all the cases that are there. That's the scary part about what's happening right now, is that it's giving police carte blanche. It's saying what happens on the streets, and folks, you're on your own.
And what happens in the precinct happens in the precinct. Remember, Derek Chauvin was in charge of off-duty assignments in his precinct. He was a very powerful guy. And the federal consent decree prohibited a patrolman from serving in such a role. They were essentially, he was in charge of his superiors. Mm-hmm. So on one level, he could, everybody had to stand back, because really he was the big guy at the station. Mm-hmm. Because Derek Chauvin, remember, he knew George Floyd through a big club. George Floyd was a big guy because he was a big, handsome guy who knew all the pro basketball players who came into town, and he brought them to the club. So it made him a big guy. Only heaven knows how Derek Chauvin really felt about him. Mm-hmm. Right? The women liked him. He was someone who people liked a whole lot. There's just a whole lot there. Texas State Representative Ron Reynolds, from what I can understand, if the federal consent decree, and you help me to understand this, if the federal consent decree has been ended, then it falls on a state or a county or a city. Is that mm-hmm. true? So what does that mean? And what does that mean for you? Because because George Floyd, of course, was from the great state of Texas.
That's right. Santita, let me say this quickly so I can get right into it. It's great to be on. I miss you guys. I everything Daryl said was spot on. I was with the Floyd family today on the 5th anniversary of George Floyd's death. I was with the family pretty much from morning until just recently. I'm wearing my Good Trouble shirt for a reason, but there's no mistake about the Trump administration reversing course on the decree, because the consent decree, because they are trying to reverse the progress that was made because of the Good Trouble, because of people of all races coming together during that pandemic, marching, protesting in record numbers across the country and across the world, across the globe, for the reforms that were implemented. And thank goodness that, Minneapolis, I was with Ben Crump today, Al Sharpton and others, that were all in concert for these changes, and they were implemented. Unfortunately, the federal legislation wasn't passed under the George Floyd Policing Act. That stalled, but there was consent decrees. There was some progress. In Texas, we made some progress, under ending banning chokeholds, creating a duty for an officer to intervene. So we made some marginal progress. But what this is them reversing course. This is part of the MAGA Trump Project 2025, where they're going to roll back these protections that Attorney Jones really articulated, and they want to take away civilians' rights. They want to give more power back to the police to be able to harm citizens. They want to we never did get qualified immunity, but what they're doing by taking away the consent decree is saying, hey, just as Daryl was describing, Trump wants to have these officers be able to rough up these people without any kind of recourse. They have rolled back many of the protections that were afforded from the Department of Justice. Thank goodness Governor Tim Walz says we are going to continue to do these things that we put in place. Thank goodness they want to operate in good faith. But Santita, to your question, since the federal government is saying, "Hey, we're not going to intervene," our Justice Department, our Civil Rights Division, we will not. I'm thankful that Minnesota and Minneapolis, under great leaders like Tim Walz and Keith Ellison, the
Mhm.
great attorney general, who were stepped in the first place to prosecute Officer Chauvin, former Officer Chauvin, to bring justice for George Floyd and his family. Just to listen to them today, this is like spitting on his grave. This is a insult. This is President Trump and his MAGA extremists saying we don't care about the rights of Black and brown and marginalized communities. We want the police to continue to prey and cause and wreak havoc in the form of justice and law and order. And so this is, we made progress, and this is the Trump administration said we're going to take that progress back. And so my reason why I'm saying I'm wearing this shirt is because it is time for all of us of good conscience to say we have to get in good trouble. Just like Emmett Till was a catalyst for change and led the precursor to the Montgomery bus boycott and the civil rights movement, George Floyd's death was a catalyst for change for police reform. And yet we made some progress, but because of this administration, much of that progress is going backwards. So it is time for us to roll up our sleeves on this 5-year anniversary and recommit ourselves to the same good trouble that we made when we took it to the streets during the pandemic, because even though much has changed, in many regards, we're going backwards with this anti-DEI movement that the George Floyd brought in, where corporations, where police departments, where
Mhm.
people were saying, "Hey, we need change." Now, because of this anti-DEI movement, they're going back to the old ways.
Well,
In many ways, they're trying to get worse. So,
well,
yes, Santita, much has changed, but much has gotten worse because in 2025, we now see a threat to police reforms that were made because of George Floyd's death.
but Project 2025 was actually enacted in 2022, right? So, and since 2022, we've had more people killed by police. I mean, this happened under the Biden administration, and while he was in office, we were begging him, beseeching him to sign an executive order. And we see with President Trump that you can sign an executive order if you want to, and he signed some too, right? Of
That's
just
right.
a few on the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act. Would that, in your estimation, as a lawmaker, and I'm going to give this to all of you because I need you to help me with this because you make the laws. Because now I guess it's falling on you, and your fellow representatives to deal with this in your state. I mean, would that have made a difference? Do you think? Because so many people have been killed since George Floyd. I mean, it's like we hadn't learned anything before Trump got in because it was like it was open season, and that was so quiet. No one talked about it. But
I think
they've
it
been
would make
killing
a difference,
people.
Santita. Santita, I think it would make a tremendous difference because part of the George Floyd Policing Act was for civilian review boards.
Mhm.
That was a key piece, and I know Daryl knows that very well.
Mhm.
Those jurisdictions that have civilian review boards, especially those with subpoena power, they're able to hold and do their own investigations just like a grand jury could, and they're able to then hold officers accountable, and that is a powerful tool in the toolbox for police accountability. So civilian review boards, body worn cameras, ending qualified immunity, making sure that there's a duty for officers to intervene, banning chokeholds. There are a lot of things that we can do to reduce and put in guardrails so that we don't have as much police misconduct and police brutality and it's at the hands of black and brown and marginalized communities. So yes, you can't erase it all,
Mhm.
but you can significantly put in reforms to hold officers accountable, and then that would serve as a deterrent for other officers. But without these laws in place, uniform laws, that's why it needs to be federal legislation. You don't
Mhm.
have piecemeal in Texas, you have this in Georgia, you have that in Minnesota, you have this in California, you have that. No, we need federal comprehensive legislation, and that's what you had with the George Floyd Policing Act. So can it eliminate all forms? No. But will it reduce it? Absolutely. It
What
will
happens
reduce
in a
it.
state like yours? Governor Walz in Minneapolis is a progressive, and he's someone who's very. I mean, he took a lot of heat when he was running for vice president, when he was supporting his ticket, because he was trying to. He saw no one who saw this man choked to death walked away. You can't unsee that.
You
Mhm.
can't unsee over 9 minutes and 29
You
seconds
can't.
of him
And
calling for his, saying, I can't breathe,
it,
calling for his mama, of
it,
people watching in real time as this man kills him. This was a modern day lynching
it was
that we witnessed before our very eyes.
so what do you do with Governor Abbott?
Well, what we do
I don't
is,
because I mean what I mean and let him be the avatar, the the metaphor, if you will. Let him be
yes,
the symbol
let, let me,
for
let,
a hostile governor.
let me tell you what we do, Santita. And this is my words. What we do is we hold Governor Abbott accountable just like we would if it was a black person. And my thing I want to say is that Governor Abbott has not answered the call for the majority of the citizens that he represents. He's been beholden to the special interest and the small percentage that vote in Republican primaries. So what he's done is politically expedient for Governor Abbott to appeal to his MAGA base. And what we must do as citizens is vote people like that out of office because they don't represent the majority. They represent the small few who vote in Republican primaries. That is not a statesman. That is not a patriot. That is someone that placates to his far right MAGA extreme base. And what I want to do is a call to action for people to wake up and vote their values. That is the only way that we change these things. Protesting is a part of the process. Resistance is a part of the process. But if you don't vote, you don't finish the job. People started the job when they went in protest. They took it to the streets. They started the job when they refused to shop at establishments that roll back DEI like Target, and we've hit them in the pocketbook and they're feeling it. But the way you finish the job is you vote those people out of office that don't value you as an American citizen. That is how we finish the job, Santita. Governor Abbott will not stop doing what he's doing until he sees at the poll that people are going to vote him and other people out of office. That is the way we get their attention.
And
Well,
Santita, I
I
think
mean,
that
and
Representative Reynolds
Democrats too,
is
because I must
100%.
well, because if you don't mind, let me in this context, Joe Biden. Before we get, I'm going to go to you, and then of course get you, To.
Mm.
Um, Joe Biden was very, very, very pro police. And I think that was part of the
Mhm.
reason we could not get him to give us an executive order. Remember, this is someone who went on the floor of the U.S. Senate. Number one, he was very, very, he called for a police officer's Bill of Rights within 2 weeks of Rodney King being almost beaten to death on camera.
I remember
Everything he
that.
did was pro police, and he was not supportive of victims. He wasn't. And so I'm just saying, to me, this is a transpartisan thing.
That's
Because there
right.
are a lot of people who don't stand up to the police when they, I mean, and there are a lot of good police officers out here. There are a lot of them. But when there is corruption anywhere, these people have our lives in their hands. I mean, I don't know any black person, and quite frankly, more and more people. I don't know anyone who is stopped at a traffic stop
That's right.
who doesn't get anxious. I don't care how if it's a traffic jam. You're like, Lord, if I have my hands in the air. That's no
Mhm.
guarantee. then I'm gonna walk out of this alive. Daryl, excuse me.
Yeah, no, you're 100% on point. And Santita, I think that part of what Representative Reynolds was saying, I wanted to lift up, because we talk about people in the community when they're being oppressed by the police, going and trying to have rallies and trying to do things to push back against the oppression and call attention to the oppression that they're experiencing. But one of the things that we've got to take notice of, and I can't speak for Texas, but let's lift up the state of Florida, because this is a state by state thing, because we don't have federal legislation to protect folks that are in place. So when we're looking at the state of Florida, when Black folks there wanted to stand up and protest the actions that were occurring against their interests, against their community, what did the state of Florida do? The state of Florida's representatives, their General Assembly, then enacted laws to make it illegal for them to hold these rallies, illegal for them to block the roads, illegal for them to protest. So when we're looking at this on a state-by-state process, what I'm concerned with happening is that you have some of these states, Louisiana, you have some of these states, Mississippi, you have some of these states, Florida, that are going to come down hard on the people that are trying to have their rights protected. That's the reason why we have the U.S. Department of Justice that's in place, so that they can come in and say, you know what, Louisiana, you know what, Mississippi, you know what, Florida, you're wrong. We're going to do this investigation. We're going to unearth some of the things that you've done. Let me say that again, unearth some of the things that you've done, because a lot of it no one's ever heard of and will probably never hear of. But we have the federal government that then has the ability to come in and try to protect the citizens that are in those states that don't have the power to be able to overcome what's being thrown their way. So, Santita, that's why the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act was so important, because we know there are states that are going to snuff people down to keep them quiet. But if the federal government could do its job and step in place and protect those individuals, it would make just a much more level playing field for all the people that are being impacted.
But I think that's why we have to stop being. There's some issues for us. Look, the party's supposed to work for you. You're not supposed to work for the party.
That's right.
And I think because we were so locked into party politics, to our disadvantage now, we did not demand. I mean, you had some people who said, hey, we should have said, no, my vote is dependent upon this.
Yeah.
Because more people, I repeat, the studies have shown, the data shows, T.O., that more people have been killed since George Floyd than before George Floyd.
Got it. Well, Santita, the way I look at it, I'm going to look at it from a revolutionary lens, okay? I'm one of the frontline brothers here in Chicago that stood up against police brutality and excessive force. We shut down Lakeshore Drive along with a lot of other brothers and sisters as well. And then we marched every chance we had the opportunity to march and raise our voices. But I'll say this much to you.
In what case? Let people remind people.
Laquan McDonald case, when a young man was killed. And the killing of George Floyd was like a
Wait a minute,
public...
and the mayor covered it.
Yeah, Mayor Rahm Emanuel covered up the murder. He was complicit in the murder. Most people would be charged with a crime for doing something like that, but he was able to skate past that, and Biden appointed him as the ambassador to Japan, okay?
And
Even
now
after
he's
he
on
was brought up-
CNN.
Yeah, now he's on CNN.
Yes, he's a columnist for the Washington Post. They're talking about him running for president. I'm just saying.
No, let's just be honest about it. Now, the thing about police brutality and excessive force, it's a step backwards what the DOJ is attempting to do. But in reality, what happened we have to go back in time a little bit in order to bring it up in context. When the Black Panther Party organized against police brutality and excessive force, laws were changed so they could not carry guns with them, like in public, whatever the case may be, because they were some serious brothers, and sisters. They were not just talking, they were willing to go all the way to address this issue. Now, think about it. When Dr. King, which he did a good job fighting for civil rights back in the 60s and all that kind of good stuff was going on, your father and everybody else. But when 1970 kicked in, we had we felt that we really accomplished a lot when we achieved civil rights. And that's a good thing, don't get me wrong. But we felt we accomplished a lot. But you had some people behind the scenes. That's when the failed war on drugs kicked in as well. When you had all
let me say this. Let me jump in here.
I'm just trying to put a context out there.
No, but I'm trying to give you context too, because that's why Reverend never stopped pushing. because it
Right.
was
No, he can see the
also
push. Right.
in the aftermath of Dr. King's assassination that we started pushing to get money in our communities. Because if you know, you remember, because we're old enough to remember, not you, Ron Reynolds, but the rest of us kind of old enough to remember when the money seriously was flowing in our communities.
Right.
And that was
But
because we were pushing.
mhm,
Now our generation began to get soft. Because when I was in college in the 80s, people were
mhm,
telling me that marching did not make a difference.
Mm.
exactly.
Marching was unimportant. We got real soft. We
That
did.
was the point I was about to make, Santita.
Okay,
What
I'm
happened is
glad
I
you
think
talked.
we kind of got lax, Santita, and we went to sleep at the wheel, so to speak, and then we allowed a lot of these other policies to kick in, like when Biden pushed that super thug policy, down, on the federal level. And like I said, I'm going
No,
back to the
what I'm
failed war
saying
on
is, wait a
drugs.
minute. I have to interrupt you here because
Yes.
some of us pushed back. Some of
No,
us
we.
were lulled into a false sense of security because you had a white president who played a saxophone, who sat, who could talk black to us, right? Because
Mhm,
remember they called Clinton the first black president.
They sure did. They
Did we
sure
not?
did.
right.
Okay, now
They
we did
did.
that,
Yeah.
and we fell for that. Now, mind you, and I say this as someone who likes Bill Clinton a lot because I learned a lot about politics from him, even as I disagreed with him fiercely on a lot of issues. I did and we did. That having been said, wait a minute, it was there was some leadership because Reverend's never been in. He's always been the person who's been on the outs.
Mm,
His
yeah.
personality and his charisma was such that he was so big that you couldn't get around him.
But all
But
I'm
be very
saying,
clear when what I'm saying is I'm trying to give this context. No,
okay.
I have to do it because
Mhm,
I have been places when we were seated until Reverend ran for president and was successful at it. We were seated in the back of the ballroom at the Congressional Black Caucus dinner. Always. We have never
mhm.
been accepted. We've never been acceptable, Ron,
Mm.
Daryl. It was only after he ran and was not killed and was successful and made history that people started making way for us.
Mhm.
That was it. And what I'm saying is, and that's not Jesse Jackson per se as much as it is him per se, but it's what he was standing for, the people in the streets.
Yes. And that's correct. And so the only thing I want to add to that, Santita, is this here. The reality is that when our people fought for our freedoms and our liberties, there was a diabolical plan that was put in place during the COINTEL era. And then when the drugs hit our community, the drugs hit our community for a diabolical purpose to kind of stymie the progress of African American people. But drugs began to spread nationwide. White people, everybody started using drugs. But the thing is this here, it was an effort to stop the next Messiah from coming into power here in the United States. This is all documented. So when we talk about police brutality, excessive force, it's an institution, right? And you have black high-level police officials along with white police, high-level officials that were all part of overlooking some of the issues with police problems in the black community. Because once you join that institution, you become a part of that institution. A lot of people were scared to speak up and speak out because they did not want to lose their status. I know this for a fact because I have a lot of friends on the police force here in Chicago. One of my good friends, he was his number 2 in command. He just abruptly resigned about 8 years ago because he got tired and he couldn't make the changes he wanted to make. Then he just got out the way. He just said, forget it. We haven't heard from him since then because
Mm.
there's an oath they
Yeah.
take. This is happening across. There's a preponderance of evidence, not just the killings. I'm talking about the wrongful convictions, the wrongful like arrests and all that kind of stuff. Like one law that really needs to be examined. I'm not gonna say you have to change it. The resisting arrest law should be examined a little bit further because if let's say you didn't do anything wrong, the police pull you over, then they attempt to arrest you, even though you haven't done anything wrong, and you resist, you can get hurt, shot or killed, or worse, you might do something to hurt the police. I have to say this, and I said again, George Floyd, when they killed that man, I'm glad I wasn't present there. I'm not saying that I would have done nothing real crazy or anything, but I probably would have got that officer off his neck. That's what I'm talking about. Now, I might have got messed up in the process. I'm not advocating any violence. I'm one of the frontline brothers, though, intellectual thought leader brothers as well. I could not sit back for 9 minutes and watch that
But
police
Theo,
zap the life out of George Floyd. I could not do that.
but you know what would have happened also?
What happened,
Some
Santita?
other people. No, I'm saying what might have happened. I'm
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
I can't say. I don't know. If I
Hmm.
had seen you moving toward the
Yes.
police, somebody would have held you back. Because
Yeah.
we would no, because
That's a
we would
deep
say,
one. That's deep. No,
I
I'm
don't
listening
want
to you. I'm listening.
I don't want another one. And then maybe
Yes.
if we say something, we can shake this up. The fact that, and the reason I keep pressing is this, Tio, because now that Reverend is moving off the scene, now you're about to see the gap. You didn't see the gap
Yeah.
until he started moving off the scene, because Reverend never stopped. He hasn't stopped.
That's right. He kept going.
No.
But let me say this last thing,
No. Let
Santita.
me say this. No, let me say this, because
Yeah.
now
Okay.
this generation, because he did his work. He did
Yes.
everything you wanted,
Yeah.
all the money you wanted, all the contracts you wanted. The thing is, you couldn't get paid as a black DJ until he helped out to help to organize NATRA. You didn't have black people playing in Coliseums until we had Expo. You got a black president, you got a woman vice president, and you got women on the ticket, you got people of color on the ticket. All that is stuff that he did. Dr. King was the architect, Reverend is known as the builder. Now we have fallen. We're the ones who told Reverend and anyone else who would listen to shut up. We like Biden. Y'all are being too hard on him. We're afraid of Trump. Are you serious right now? Now more people have been killed since 2022 than ever before. And now this ain't just Trump. This
Yeah.
Tio.
It's an institution. Yeah.
This has been ongoing.
Right. Exactly. But I just want to add, and I want to make it clear.
How do we stop it?
Well, you have to stop it by enforcing the the consent decrees across the nation. You got to get people. It's about people power, right? And so what I'm saying, I'm the president of Violence Interrupted, so I don't want to get the wrong information out there. I know how to take over volatile situations, Santita. So what I'm saying, if I was present there, I'm not saying I would have had to do nothing real crazy or extreme, but I would have got to offer George Floyd's neck, because I know how to deal with those kind of situations and make sense out of them. Okay, so let me just put that out there. But how do you get back to where we can straighten these type of situations out?
Well, Robert,
we have to organize the people
just so
on a higher level.
Robert is giving. I'm not cutting you off. I'm just saying. Robert is saying. Did you say I feel you, Tio?
Y'all hear what he said?
I got him. No. But what would you have said? Because what could you?
I'm telling you, it's a way. No, it's a way you have to take over those type of situations. I'm gonna tell you what I would have done.
Okay.
I would have cussed them officers out in the strongest voice ever. They would have heard my voice the rest of their lives, because I would have saved their life and saved their career when I would have stepped up. And I would let the Chinese officer know, you got to get out the way. I'm not going to let you all kill this black man on his ground. Now, if they did not listen, then I would probably have to take some other measures, myself, to a degree. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but I've done this time and time again. Right in Hyde Park, Chicago, there was almost an accident. Two brothers almost hit each other's car. They got out the car, was ready to fight each other, and they was ready to one guy picked up a stick. I cussed them both out in front of the whole big crowd out there, and they got back in their cars and they drove off because of the way I talked to them. Remember, I can't say it on your show the way that I talk to my people, right? So I'm just saying, what I would have done, I'd have took over that situation, and I'd have helped save George Floyd's life. Promise you that. I promise you.
And Santita, one of the things that's important when we're talking about these consent decrees, precisely what Brother Tio was talking about is the reason that we need to have the consent decrees in place. Got to remember that he wouldn't feel the need, and he shouldn't feel the need. No one should feel the need to interfere with a policing action. If there is a culture of policing that would have had the other officers that were on scene say, what you're doing is wrong, and took them off of George Floyd, that's what should have happened. But that's the culture of policing that said, let it happen. And then you have a response like you have from Brother Tio saying, if y'all ain't going to do what you're supposed to do, let me do it. Let me be the one to come in and make this unjust situation correct to save this brother's life. But that's the reason that we've been pushing so hard for these consent decrees, is that the police officers are in a position where they're not policing themselves. And this is what the consent decree is supposed to do, is to go into investigate that, pull it apart, and change the system. Because there's not enough T.O. Hardimans around the country to handle every situation that exists. But if you can go to the root of the problem, you can then start to get rid of it. And that's what the consent decree was meant to do, Santita.
Well, and see, T.O. has dedicated his life to this.
Right.
So, because most of us are lay people. We don't know. That's why I was asking you, Tio, because most of us, we don't know what you know. We don't, and we need to start having some workshops because everybody keeps saying comply. I'm like, when you comply, you die. We've seen that. Philando Castile,
Right.
anyone? They killed him in front of a little girl and his
That's what I'm
fiance.
Yeah.
I
talking
mean,
about.
what?
Right. Right.
It's like, what? This, it has not stopped.
Yeah.
It has not stopped. And I had
Unfortunately.
one
Yeah.
president who refused to sign an executive order to impose some order. Somebody's life could have been saved.
Mm.
Somebody's lives could have been saved.
And
He
careers
refused to
could
do
have
it.
been saved.
And
Right.
guess what? And now, I mean, I don't see an appreciable difference here.
Mhm.
Mm.
I don't.
I got you.
And in the meantime, people, when my brother, who is a sitting U.S. congressman, when my other brother, who is a successful businessman, it don't matter because you're not black by degrees, you're black by pedigree. When I talk to them on the phone, if I'm talking to you on the phone, Ron, if you all notice, I stay with you until you get home
Yeah.
Mm.
because I want to make sure you get in the door.
Yeah.
Because Skip Gates showed me that even when he pulls up to his
Ooh.
house, they wonder, what are you doing here? Because you know Cambridge is not for black people. What? This is one of the most renowned academics on earth. What are you doing here, boy? Hey, this I'm hearing crickets here. Am I wrong?
No, no,
No, that's just it's
I
right.
totally agree.
I'm just saying because I'm looking for because I've got nephews now, and with Breonna Taylor, I got nieces. It don't matter.
Mm.
I got a black woman who went down to Texas for a job, and this
Mhm.
woman was more than 6 feet tall, and they said she hanged herself. Sandra,
Yeah.
you what?
Sandra Bland. Say her name. Sandra
What?
Bland.
I mean, are you really serious? When her feet were scraping the floor, what?
That's right.
So I mean, something has got to give here.
For
Coming up in
sure.
the next hour, everybody, we're going to talk about the 106,000 black women lost their jobs. Black women have lost more jobs than anyone in America
Mm.
in a very short period of time. We're going to talk about that in the next hour. That ought to be interesting. But we're talking about this. I'm going to get some closing thoughts from all of you. And this is not the last time we'll talk about this. Good trouble.
Okay.
It
Because
doesn't need to
because
be because
and Paul, you know, Tio, I just engaged Tio. Tio indulges me because I just like
Oh
that.
yeah, yeah.
But he does. But
That's
you know,
correct.
I mean, because some people, you know,
Yeah.
because my father would say, not out of frustration, but like almost out of exasperation. People say, well, back in the civil rights days, wait a minute. When they were marching, these people were in the minority then.
Mhm.
There was no back in any day. And you know what? It never stopped. We went on and had Resurrection City in Washington after Dr. King was killed. Reverend was the mayor.
Yeah.
So when I talk to people
That's
from
right.
the Poor People's Campaign, I'm like, y'all, this ain't stopped. Y'all just pick this up. We've been doing this. We've been fighting for the poor. Now the question is, what are we going to do? We had a home and square in Chicago. That was a CIA style black site where people got disappeared.
Mm.
And, and now what this administration doesn't want you to even be able to sue the police.
Right.
What? I'm gonna go around. I'm gonna get a couple of minutes from, well, not that long, just under 2 minutes from everybody, so we can go. No, you know what, Robert? It's not mucked up. That means we gotta make it up and make it right. Your freedom is not handed to you. It's something that you win. And it's something that you fight to keep every day. Now, Dr. King did his job, Frederick Douglass did his job, Jesse Jackson did his job. What you gonna do? These people, now well, look at what we're losing. Yeah, look at what they gained for you. Now, what are you going to do? And it's not just for black people. This is for everybody. Pound for pound, person for person, more white people are killed and roughed up by the police than black people. Percentages are more black people are percentage wise. In terms of raw numbers, there are more white people. We got a problem with power in this country, and this is not right. Teal Hardiman, your book.
Oh yeah, interrupting gun violence, the public health approach. You can find it on Amazon. It's all about my life and my works here in Chicago. Helping to reduce homicides and working with a lot of young brothers and sisters to help them, get to a higher level of understanding in their lives and become productive members of societies, of
What's
society
your
rather.
closing
Okay.
thought here?
Oh, I just have a real quick closing thought. It's all about people power. If we organize and make sure the consent decree is implemented on its highest level, see, we cannot just stop the marching and protesting because
Mhm.
we got a consent decree, just like the way they say it. We have to just follow it all the way through. Like you said, your father kept the movement going on. And that's what it's all about, keeping the movement alive and kicking until we get the solid victory that the people are looking for. And we just cannot afford to let up. That's what's most important. Do not let up, because soon as you let up, people gonna start taking you for granted. You gotta let the people know you are serious. Just when you first started protesting and rallying, you have to let the people know you are just as serious. Even though we made some gains, but we're more serious now because we got to keep it going. In other words, all right. That'd be my
Amen to
closing
that.
thought.
Attorney Daryl, and of course on WVON Sunday mornings, 6 to 7 a.m. Central Standard Time, you can hear
Yeah.
T.O. Hardeman, everybody. Go to
Yes.
WVON.com. And of course, WOL in DC, 12 noon every Tuesday. You and Barbara Arnwine you all have some of the best shows going. 12
All
noon
right.
Eastern Standard Time. Attorney Daryl Jones, Chairman of the Transformative Justice Coalition. Whew.
Thank you, Santita. Brother Teal is right on the mark. When it comes to where we are now and what we must do, because that's the question. We know that we have a
Mhm.
Department of Justice that does not have your back. They do not have your back. That's not where they are. Well, the one thing that we've got to remember and we've got to take into consideration is politics, and the power of politics is not from the top down. It's
Mm.
from the roots up. And what I mean by that is, while the Department of Justice could do it across the board for every state across the nation, that's not going to happen. And we see that now it's not going to happen. So what we must do now is that we've got to go into each state, and each state demand your attorney general's office have the consent decrees, have the backs of the people. If you can't get to your attorney general's office, go to your local legislative body. Your local legislative body can bring the chief of police on any force before it. Any member of that local elected body can ask for the police department to come up and give account for what's happening in your city, what's happening in your county. That's where we are right now as a people, is that we've got to be certain that we get it at the grassroots level. Eventually, we'll get it back up to the federal level. But right now, we got to get it in place on the local level. We've got to stay involved. We've got to stay engaged. And most importantly, Santita, you'll hear me say it, and say it again. We've got to be certain that we're registered to vote and that we're putting in people and officers that are going to stand with and fight for our individual and our collective interest.
And press them once they get there. And of course, we're tossing it to an elected official. We love him. He's head of the Black Legislative Caucus in Texas.
Hey,
But yes.
listen, first of all, it's such a great, this feels like a family reunion when I've been gone too long and back. It's great to be back with you all. I echo everything that T.O. and my frat brother stated. But let me just say this. I know it's easy because it happens to me. It happens to all of us sometimes. We get so beat down. You can, but I'm just want to challenge everyone. Don't grow weary in well doing. We
Mm.
made some progress and we were excited. And then some of the progress we saw evaporated, like ending the consent decrees, rolling back some of the protections that were made, uh, you know, almost eliminating the Department of Education, the EEOC, the Civil Rights Division. But I want to challenge everyone that on our watch, we can't go back. Our ancestors and our forefathers whose shoulders we stand on by making good trouble, including your father, they did their part. We cannot on our watch allow them to take us back. So let's continue to stay engaged. Let's continue to fight. This is a marathon, not a sprint. And this is not where one day we can say we have achieved. It's a constant battle because a new regime comes in and then they try to take over and try to take us back again. So it may be a different version of Trump. That's why we have to stay on the battlefield. So that is my message, is that yes, this is 5 years, but we know that we still have a long way to go until we reach parity and end these disparities within policing and communities of color. So let's stay fired up and let's stay ready to go at all times.
Love you, man. Right on. Right on.
And there's that, everybody. The Santita
it.
Jackson Show here on AM 950 Radio coming up. Well, tomorrow we're going to be talking about Black women and job loss. 170,000 jobs were added to the employment rolls in April. Black women lost 106,000 jobs, more than any demographic. What is going on? What is going on? AM 950 Radio, the voice of progressive Minnesota, the Santita Jackson Show.